Living my bucolic life, free of the city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello, welcome back. And this time I am going to jump on that bandwagon and do what so many people have done by request, make this dress. This is, what do they call this? The walkaway dress. It looks like one massive piece that you kind of button together in the front, kind of a wrap thing with a full skirt in the back. So that looks like fun. I am going to be using a lighter weight fabric. Let's see, what does it call for? It calls for a lightweight broadcloth. Okay, well, that's basically what I'm using, is a weight that's about like a broadcloth, but it has a finish on one side, almost like a polished cotton. I believe it's cotton. This is one of my mystery finds. So it didn't have a content label, but it feels like cotton. And so it was a little bit stiffer. I pre-washed it in hot, pre-dried it on hot. So hopefully if there was any shrink, it is all gone. And right now it's nice and soft and ready to go. And this dress looks like it requires a whole lot of bias tape. And I just took a quick glance at the pattern layout. And I'm not sure that I'm going to have a big enough square to be able to make bias tape out of the scraps. I would like to, because being big and bold in red, you know, it'd be nice to have a matching bias tape edging. If I can't, I have a calico that would be fine to go ahead and make that, and that way it would be a, you know, a contrast but adding interest type of bias tape. And I will be making my own bias tape, obviously, so we'd be doing that later. So yeah, the first thing I need to do is go ahead and cut this out. Because it has a very full skirt in the back and a straight type skirt in the front, it looks like this. I think it's going to be a little forgiving around my hips, so I am going to be cutting out the size 16. Now on this one, even though it's just a forgiving wrap type thing, it does have darts. You can see right there, darts that point to an apex. So I will be lowering those because my apex is a little bit lower. And yeah, let me go ahead and get my pattern opened up, cut out. I am going to be doing my usual size 16. And if there's any modifications along the way, I will let you know. Now, as I cut this out, I was thinking, you know what, I need to mention that I was told that a lot of other channels were doing this dress. I don't know that for sure, and I don't know anything about what people are saying about besides that it was requested that I do it. I purposely don't watch other channels. I don't read other pattern reviews. One, I don't have time, but also I don't want it to cloud my personal opinion and my personal judgment and the way that I attack a pattern. Like if I read a review and says, oh, you know, the collar is so tricky, I'm going to go into it with that pre-judgment, and so I might not take it the way that I do if I didn't know about it. You know what I mean? So I have no idea the good, the bad, and the ugly on this dress. It just is what it is. It's kind of interesting because the front piece has the bodice and the skirt as one big piece, which is a little bit different than normal. And so the one thing that I am going to do is, before I get into modifying the bodice, is I need to figure out the finished length that I want, because this is a circle skirt in the back and straight in the front. And I want to be able to, because I'm usually a lot shorter than their finished lengths. And it says here the finished length, they're measuring it from the base of the back of the neck for my size is 42 3/4. So I'm just going to hold a measuring tape up here, put a clothespin at 42 3/4, see where that lands, and see how that matches up with what I want for my finished dress. Okay, so after measuring that, I can tell you I'm going to be taking about 3 inches off the bottom. So I'll show you that as I cut it. But and that's pretty standard. I'm usually taking off 3 or 4 inches of things. But I wanted to tell you that the skirt back, it's a big circle skirt, and it's so wide that there are actually 2 pieces. So you need to tape those 2 pieces together before you actually alter it. I want to show you something. While I was visiting my daughter in Chicago last weekend, get the price tag off here, I got this really cool little tape dispenser, which I am so happy about because I can use, well, I can't get it off. Everyone will know I paid $6 for it, but it's massive, it's heavy, so you can just one-handedly pull off a nice piece of tape, so I don't have to use my packing tape up here for pattern mods anymore. So I'm really excited about this. I love this old thing. So anyhow, let me go ahead and I'm going to iron all of my pattern pieces to get the wrinkles out. Tape my circle skirt pieces together so I end up with 1 big piece instead of 2, 3 and 3A. You put those together and then we'll start shortening. Okay, so these are the 2 circle skirt pieces, and there's a little row of dots, little beads there. Those overlap and match on each side. So you get those little circles to all match up, and then everything else should still be good, and just tape your pieces of paper together. And now this is 1 huge circle skirt piece. And then to shorten it, I just am going to mark at 3 inches all the way across the circle part, and then come back and just trim along those marks. So this is the front piece here, and this is the bodice, and then the skirt starts about here. The waistline is just below this lengthen and shorten hairline, which I am going to be using. And I need to move. See, when you have a dart pointing at something that's too high, it's just too obvious, you know? And on my body, the part that it needs to point at has fallen an inch, you know? Depending on the day, maybe more, but I'm gonna go for an inch, okay? So I need to keep everything the same except for what I want to change. And below the waistline is gonna be okay, as far as I know right now. This part here, the center, I don't want to extend that, so that's okay. And up here is okay. So it's just this little section right there that I'm going to be altering. So what I have is I have it lined up on the grid lines so that this center fold is on one of my grid lines, so I can draw on here. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw a line up and down 2 inches in here from, a couple inches below the waistline up to above this dart. You know, it's not exact at this point, but I got a line here. Now above the dart, this one here, I am again on a 90-degree angle. I'm going to draw a line straight across from the edge up to the line that I drew here. So I have this. And then I'm going to be using this lengthen and shorten hairline for my bottom point. So what I'm going to do is get my scissors and cut here and here, okay? Those 2 cuts right now. Okay, so I turned it so that it's easier for me to work up and down here. Let me see if I can move you over. So at this point, this is still connected. This here is open. Now if I want to drop it 1 inch, I'm going to make folds down here that are 1/2 inch, because a 1/2 inch plus a 1/2 inch is 1 inch. So I'm just lining up my ruler with my lengthen and shorten here line. Gonna fold this piece down on that line. My ruler moved on me. Okay, so at this fold right here, it's going straight across. Then putting my ruler at 1/2 inch, I'm going to flip it up. And that, I can tell you right now, that is barely giving me enough room over here. So if you're going to need to drop it any more than 1 inch, you're going to need to make your cross line down here a little bit lower, okay? Yeah, I'm going to draw a line 1 inch lower, which is going to be putting it just below my waistline. This little mark here is waistline. So I am still in the ballpark, you know. It's not going to be terribly awkward because this is just one long piece here. Okay, so using this line then as my new fold line, just cut this a little lower. Okay, I think that will work better. Put my ruler here, fold the whole thing down, make a crease. Put my ruler on top of that at 1/2 inch and flip it back up. My ruler keeps wanting to move. Okay, so now I have this folded 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. So if I put this on here, I should have a 1 inch gap up on top. And it looks like I do. So what I'm going to do first is tape this fold together down here. And tape this little side to hold that. Love my tape dispenser. Look at that. Grabbing tape with one hand. Okay. So now that this is being held in place, I'm going to put another piece of tape right here to hold these two in place. And then I just have this gap to deal with. So I can put a piece of tissue paper for my scraps in the back here. And just try to make sure that it's staying about 1 inch all the way across and tape that. Now over here, these two are not matching up exactly now. I'm just going to blend it. So from here, I'm just going to blend, blend, blend to there. Okay, so just kind of making it work. See if you can see that. So that's going to be my new cutting line here. And I can put another piece of tape here. And that whole modification is done. Okay, so now that is my new bodice front with a low bust adjustment. Now if you noticed when I made that adjustment, like you can see right here where this front piece is, I shortened it a little bit because the fold is right below this armhole area, okay? And if this part was being matched up to the back and they had to match perfectly, I would make some adjustment on the back also, but they don't. The way you put this thing on is the two backs come together and it's like a big button and button loop back here. So it doesn't really matter that this is a slightly different length than the back because they don't actually match up. So that's a good thing. So I am just going to not worry about that. This is my back piece. Yes, it has a dart, but that dart is to point to my shoulder blade-ish area and the tapering in and everything. So I'm just going to leave this piece as is. And I think that's it for the modifications, and I'm going to go ahead and get started cutting it out. I'm going to follow mostly along with their layout there. These skirt pieces are huge. Those are really, really full. So you're going to have an entire circle skirt from from this point around, so that's going to be a really full skirt. Okay, so I am going to be starting with my big front piece here. Lots to mark, so I've got my little scrap piece of leather, and I'm just going to work my way around, punching out the holes. So this triangle is a shoulder placement. Get one of my heat erasable pens. If it will draw, I'm wondering if it's because of the coating on the fabric. Okay, so that's an interesting point. Only one side of my fabric has the coating, and the other side does not. So this side, I don't know if you can tell, it's slightly shinier, and this side is not shiny. And I kind of want the shiny side on the outside. So that means I need to take this off because unfortunately I had it folded so the other sides were together. So if I'm going to be marking it, I need to flip it so that my fabric is the other way up. So give me a second. I'm going to unpin this and get my fabric so it is laying here flat so I can just put my piece on and mark through it. Okay, so I got my fabric out flat, the wrong side up, so now I can mark it. So I'm just going to show you one, but what I'm going to do is stick a little piece of leather underneath, and I just punch out all of these circles, and then I will come back and through those circles make a little dot with my heat erasable pen, so that then after that I can come back and connect all the dots. Okay, so when I pull my paper away, I have a lot of things to connect, and got my curvy ruler in case I need that, but I'm going to start with just my regular straight ruler. And I have mark all the way at the very apex, all the way down to the base here. So I'm just going to connect these this way. And then I have a dart here and a dart here, okay? So I could use this and shape it around the dart, but I think it's going to be easier just to go dot to dot, and then I can make any adjustments I need to as I sew. So I'm literally just going one dot to the next, and these all end up here at this same little point. And I'll draw these and this other dart here, and then I'll do the same thing over here. So when I get done, I'm going to have lines drawn everywhere. Okay, so I have got a lot of dart things going on here, and I think that what I'm going to do is actually do these two first, and once this is done, then come back and pin this one. Just because if I have too many pins in this one little area, it can get a little bit cluttered. So that is my plan. So what I'm going to do is stick a pin down, one dot, and back up its coordinating dot, and do that down here also. And I'm going to just put one, just catch a thread here at the very end, just to have a little guide point. And up here, it's at this point where all things come together. So I'm just going to pinch it there, push these together, and let me just flip this here. Try to make sure that all of this is perfectly straight. Stick a little pin up here. Odd shaped little fabric piece at the top. Sorry about that. Okay, so now I can just anchor these in. And again, I pull my pin straight up and down because sometimes when it's sideways, things get misaligned. So straight up and down, tuck it in. Straight up and down, tuck it in. And this one up here at this point, just going to tuck it in. So what I did here, I'm going to do for the other three up and down double pointed darts, and then I'll go over to my sewing machine and put these in. So I wanted to show you the machine I'm going to be using today. This is one that I just finished restoring last week, And I've named her Daria, which from what I understand means of the sea, since she's sea foam green here, or sea mist green. So she is a 1895 Singer 1511. And that's very special because 1895 is the very first year that the 15 became the 15, which is a really, really well made, well-loved machine. They ran for, what, 60-something years at Singer, cranking out millions of these, and they're still being made, you know, in Asia, India, different places. They're still making, you know, clones of the 15. So she is in my treadle base, and so we are going to be using a treadle today. So anyhow, let me go ahead and get this first dart started. And what I'm doing is I'm starting, okay, so here's the thing. Technically, the correct way to do a two-pointed dart is to start in the middle, come off this side, start in the middle, go off that side. So you do two separate seams, one coming up here, one going down there. If I was not using a fabric that was a sturdy woven, I might do that. My fabric is a sturdy woven, so I feel very confident that I can come down here and get started just on one end and run my little way through. I'm not going to be back stitching, however. I will be leaving long tails so that I can just, trying to get my needle started at the very edge here. I am going to be leaving long tails so I can tie those by hand when I get done. Okay, so since I have my little lines on there, I can just follow along. When I get to the end, I'm just going to kind of go off the edge, pull it out, and leave some nice long tails here. Oops, hang on. So let me just clip it here. Like that. Okay, so to tie off my tails, let me put this light over here so maybe you can see. Can you see that? Okay, so to tie off my tails, I've got it here. I just make a big loopy knot, not securing it yet, just leaving the big loop there. Stick a straight pin through that loop and through the very last stitch area, and then I can just cinch it in, and that loop will travel down to where I want it, and then I can just clip it, you know, 1/4 inch or so, 3/8 inch or so from that point. Now this other dart, it ends right exactly where this point is, where everything comes together. So try to be careful to make sure that you stay pointed at the right place, because it's such an odd spot where this other dart comes. If you get too offline, it might show up. Okay, so now that my double pointed darts are in, I'm going to go ahead and do my side ones now. Again, the same way, pin down one dot, up the second dot, down here. It's just, I'm going to put my pin about 1/8 of an inch in at that line, if I can, and pinch it through and pinch the very top to line it up. Pin it down, and then that's going to give me a place to sew. So I will start sewing at the very outside edge out here, and sew straight up to the tip, and just like these, just go straight off and then hand tie that knot at the tip of that dart. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for this side and this side. Okay, so now this is done. So this main dart, I've pressed it down, these press towards the middle, and the instructions say you can trim this dart if you would like. So I'm just taking that extra bit off with my pinking shears, and that's going to make this a whole lot more flush over here on this side. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Just trimming it down so at the most it's about 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch wide. Okay, so let me scoot her over here so you can see. Right now it just looks like a little sheath dress in the front, you know, and it's kind of cute. And then you turn it around, it's like, whoa boy, everything's visible. So you can kind of see right here, that's where there's going to be like a loop and button that this part gets attached to. And your fanny's not going to show because the back has that big circle skirt, which is going to be more than enough fullness to come around to the front. But my main thing at this point is I wanted to make sure that all of these darts are pointing where I wanted them to, and I'm pretty sure that they are. So that's good. This is a very thin fabric. I mean, not thin, lightweight, you know? It's lightweight like a blouse fabric almost, but that's what the pattern called for. And because that skirt is so big, I think that if you're using a really heavy fabric, it might be a little too much. So we're going to go with it. I'm going to leave this here for a minute and get started on the back piece. Okay, so for the back bodice piece, the first thing I'm going to do is the same as I did on the front, you know, punch out my little circles on this dart and draw those lines to mark them and make this dart just the same as I made the darts on the front, you know, sewing from the outside edge to this point and then hand tying the thread here. And the only other thing I need to do is clip a couple notches, just 2, because this is cut on a fold, and then there's one extra dot right here that I need to mark, and I think that that has to do with where the I don't even know what that is. That might have something to do with where the two come together. I guess we'll figure out what that dot is for later. So let me go ahead and get this dart marked and sewn, and I'll be right back. Now I'm looking at the pattern, and it's got these 3 little dots here at the center front, and I'm pretty sure that's for button placement, so I'm not going to put that on right now because it'll just, you know, get erased anyway, but I'm pretty sure that's what those dots are for. Alright, so this is what my back looks like right now. I've got my darts in and pressed towards the center. This little dot disappeared. I did come back and just serge the very bottom of this because this part is not going to get bias tape on it because it's going to be sewn onto the skirt and I don't want it to unravel, but all of the side edges should be totally encased. Up here on the shoulder, I don't know what I'm going to do there. I might do these in French seams so I don't have to worry about them. But yeah, this part is serged. So now I'm going to go get my 2 big circle skirt pieces, and what I need to do, it's easier to show you on a diagram, is put them together and make a single seam up the center back. Okay, so I want to show you, this is the center back that gets sewn together. And when I put my pieces here, I put them so that they are wrong side together instead of right side together, and I don't feel like flipping them at this point. So I'm going to do this whole back seam as a French seam because I think at this point that might be easier. I'm going to move some pins over here and do a very narrow seam, about a 1/4 inch seam all the way down the back here. Okay, so if I open this up, you can see these are the shiny sides, and I have little edges sewn together. It's cut on the selvage, so it's a little fuzzy right there. So then what I did is from the right side, I ironed it all, you know, back and forth, so I had a little bit of a crease going here. So that made it a whole lot easier to turn it to the wrong side and press it so it's got that seam I just made right along the edge. So now I'm just going to come back and make another seam here at about 3/8 of an inch, and that whole back seam line will be totally encased. Now this top part here, it's a circle, and I would think that they would want us to stay stitch that. I'm wondering if I missed that part. Okay, they're going to want us to stay stitch it after we make this seam. So as soon as I'm done doing this seam here at 3/8 of an inch, I'm just going to go ahead and flip it over so that I do a row of stay stitching around this center right here of the circle at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Hey everybody, so it's actually been a few days. I know this is supposed to be a make it in the morning, wear it to lunch kind of dress, but I got sidetracked doing a whole bunch of stuff, but it's still early in the evening. It's 6:20 at night, and I think I can go ahead and get this finished. I don't have any interruptions planned, but you know, who does? So where I last left off, I had just stay stitched around the circle skirt part. And I think at this point, what I'm going to do is run a row of serging just across the center of the little waist area of the circle skirt, because it's going to be exposed and I don't want it to fray. And once I get that done, we're going to match it up and sew it onto the back. Alrighty, so I am going to place my big circle skirt right side up. For some reason, this is seeming a lot shinier than it was before, but you know, who doesn't want a big polished cotton bright red skirt, you know? Okay. So what I need to do is find my center back. So I'm just going to fold this in half, matching those darts. Put a little crease, and I'm going to match up that little center back crease with the seam in the very back of my skirt. And I have a feeling I'm going to be clipping some of this in here to get it to match up correctly with this, but we'll see. We'll see. I'll tackle that when I get there. So I'm just going to start pinning from the outside. Okay, so if I take this and just pull it out straight, it matches up pretty well. So I'm not seeing a big problem. I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning it. And then I will sew this seam at 5/8 of an inch. And what are they going to have us do? After you sew it at 5/8, they want you to come in and sew another row at about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now as I'm pinning it, I'm noticing that it does match up well at that 5/8 mark, but it is a little bit too narrow at the top. So just to make it so that it will lay nicer, as I'm sewing it, I'm coming in here and I'm clipping up to where my stay stitching is so that the circle skirt part can flex more. And by doing that, it's going to make it a lot easier to sew. Alright, so after I sewed it, I pressed my seam allowance up towards the top, okay? Which was a little bit tricky, but because of the circle on the flap, but you know, enough maneuvering on the ironing board and it worked out. So now I'm putting my back face up. I'm going to put my front face down and match up these shoulder seams. You can see I did not serge this. What I'm going to do is just sew this at 5/8 of an inch and then come back and trim it with my pinking shears because everything else that's an outside edge I am going to be encasing in bias tape. So just a little pinking on this short little bit, that's going to be just fine. Okay, so this is what my shoulder seam looks like. You know, just pink the edges. I'm going to go put this over on my dress form for a minute while I get to work making a bunch of bias tape. Now this pattern did not come with a bias tape block, and you don't need a pattern piece. You know, you can go on Pinterest or whatever and find great things and explanations and everything. But I happen to have this pattern that I remembered had a really good bias tape block pattern piece, which is basically a parallelogram kind of piece, all right? And you cut it out on the bias. So I'm going to use this, but just know it's basically a parallelogram. So this is the grain, all right? So my finished cut is going to be on a true bias. So I'm just going to line up, see if I can get all of this on here, and I have enough big pieces of scrap that I can make my tape. There you go. If you want to see, this is the selvage edge. I can butt this edge of the piece right up to the selvage edge here. And like that, and I'm just going to pin it on and cut it out all the way around. It has these lines marked, which is just over 2 inches, okay? My bias tape maker that I'm going to use uses a 2-inch strip, so it works really well. So let me go ahead and get this piece cut out. So I am not going to be marking all of these lines, but what I am going to do is, actually I should put that on here, use my ruler, and at 2 inches in, I'm going to draw a line right here, just a couple little guidelines. And up here at the top, I don't know if you can see, 2 inches in, drawing a line here, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now with those marked, I want to make sure that I'm putting my right sides together. And this is going to get a little awkward, but I want my shiny side, which is this side here, to be on the inside. Now, it looks like I've got a point going this way and a point going this way, but I do need to sew them together. So I need to turn it this way, all right? So all of this is folded up really weird. I'm just kind of going with it right now. But I need to stagger it. So on this side, I'm going to stick my pin in about 1/4 inch down, okay? And that is going to match up with the very edge of the other fabric at about 1/4 inch down, okay? Like that. So I can go ahead and put a pin in this way just to hold that in place. Now at the top, it should stagger the same. Let me see if I can flip it over this way so you can see. So down here, this one is sticking out, which is now my top. So that side should be lower now, okay? So in the bottom one, I'm going to stick my pin in about 1/4 inch down, and that should line up with the edge of this fabric at about 1/4 inch in. Okay, so I'm going to put a little pin in here. And now I should be able to just pull this nice and tight, match them together, and sew a seam straight across here at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, if you missed it and you wanted to get this pattern just so you have the How to Make Bias Tape pattern piece, this is the one that I'm using, okay? So let me go ahead and get this pinned and sew this seam at roughly 1/4 inch. Okay, so at this point, I do need to draw my lines because otherwise I might not get a nice straight uniform width of bias tape. So you could do this ahead of time, you know, you can do it now, it's up to you. It's like my piece I cut slightly wide. I have about 1/2 inch extra here. That's okay. It's gonna work itself out as I go. And I'm only cutting one layer at a time. So I'm gonna come all the way over here to this side, okay? So I can see where that is, and yeah, you know what? Do yourself a favor and draw all of your lines ahead of time when you have your piece flat. This will work, but it's a whole lot easier just to draw them out when, you know, you have your piece flat on the table and everything. So give me a minute, let me get everything lined out on this side too, so I make sure that I'm doing uniform 2-inch cuts on this side also, and I will be right back. And basically you just start cutting around and around and around, and I did not even look to see exactly how much bias tape this dress requires, but I remember that this made a lot, so because I have extra fabric, if this isn't enough, I can always go back and make some more for like smaller pieces and everything, and you can always add more on. So again, just let me keep on cutting and cutting and cutting. It's not super critical that these sides are exact because they are going to be folded in on each other. Okay, so now that I have a huge long red ribbon here, this is the bias tape maker I'm going to be using. And the way it works is at this point I'm putting my right side, my shiny side down, and it's shaped like this at the end, and there's like a little slot. You can kind of see light through there. You feed the fabric into that little slot. And there's a place in the middle here. You can stick a stick pin in there and kind of get it tugged through to get it started. Okay, once you have it kind of coming out the bottom, take a second and get it all situated, you know, straightened out back here at the back. And what you want is for these two sides to fold in at the front, okay? So when it comes out, it looks like this. So with it started like that, I'm going to go over to my ironing board and I'll show you, but I basically put my iron here and pull this way. And so I can press it as it's folding it, as it comes out of my little bias tape maker. Okay, so I am not going to use steam while the camera is on it, but trust me, I will be using steam as soon as I turn the camera off, okay? Let me see if I can get you a little bit closer here. All right, so I'm going to pull it out a little bit, put my iron down, and just kind of keep moving down the road here. So that when I get done, I'm going to have basically a single fold bias tape that is 1 inch wide. So let me finish this whole thing with a lot of steam, and I will be right back. Okay, so at this point, I basically have a very, very long piece of single fold bias tape. But according to the instructions for the dress, what they want you to do is have double fold bias tape when you put it on. And when you're making double fold bias tape, it's important that one side, basically double fold is this, fold it in half. But it's important that one side of your fold is slightly longer than the other, okay? And I've got probably about 12 yards of this stuff. The easiest way that I have found to do it is pick a side, you know, you choose, and open up one side of it. Fold the other side in so that the edge of this fold is inside of it, and then fold this back over and press it, okay? And what that's going to do is when you open it and refold it correctly, you're going to have a uniform edge where one side is ever so slightly longer than the other side. Okay, so the longer side is going to be our outside visible side. The shorter side is going to be our underside. Okay, so I have a lot of folding and pressing to do, but that is my method. Folding this up so that the edge is just inside the fold on the top. Let me just get this situated back where it was. And then press it and just keep on going, and I'm not even going to open this until I get the entire thing done. Okay, so I just have it pinned over here on my dress form, and looking at the instructions, they want you to hem it first and then put on all the bias tape. But because the skirt is big and wide and cut on a bias, I need to make sure that I give this skirt and the weight of it and everything overnight on my dress form so that any stretch that's going to happen happens before I even it up to hem. So I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go ahead and put the bias tape on now so that tomorrow all I have to do is hem it. All right, so looking at the instructions, they have requested that you purchase 1/4 inch bias tape. Mine is 1/2 inch. So it's going to look a little bit wider, but I think it'll still be lovely. And I'm just going to start out here on the neckline. So you can see I have it so that one side is slightly longer than the other side, okay? the side that is slightly longer is going to be on the outside. So I have a lot of bias tape here. I am just going to roughly measure out the size of my neckline, give myself a couple extra inches and cut that off so I'm not dealing with, 10 yards of this stuff while I'm working. Okay, I've thought about it for a moment, and I am not going to be applying my bias tape the way they are. I'm going to do it differently. Surprise, surprise. So I'm going to flip it over so I'm looking at the wrong side. And again, I'm just doing the neckline here first. And making sure that I am using the shorter side. Okay, I'm going to fold this again just to make sure. So this is my shorter side here. That's the side I'm going to fold. I'm going to apply to my wrong side. I fold this edge in, and they want you to line that up with the shoulder seam. So that's what I'm going to do. See if I can get you in here. Okay, so let me pin this. And I basically have opened it up totally. This is my shorter side. This is the wrong side of my dress, and I am just going to come and pin it so that the edge of my bias tape is equal with the edge of my fabric. Just sliding it on folded, it can cause issues. It can just cause issues. This is a much better alternative in my opinion. Okay, so once I have it pinned like this, let me go ahead and pin it all the way around the neckline. When I get up to this point, I'm going to turn the camera back on. So I've pinned it all the way around, and this is the point where I begin. I'm just going to lay this over the top of the folded piece. Okay, and pin it over here. I'm just going to clip off this extra over there. Okay, so with this underpiece being folded, it's going to have a nice finished line here that's lined up with this shoulder seam like that. But on this side, I have get this edged up here a bit. I have the fold line from my bias tape visible, and that's what I'm going to use as my stitching line. So right here in this first fold, I'm going to go over to my machine and sew it right in that fold all the way around the neckline, just this first one right here. Okay, so this is the right side, this is the wrong side, okay, and this is my bias tape. I have it folded. And I am just going to fold it over again. Again, this is the right side, and pin it so that now I can make sure the edge of my bias tape just barely covers the stitching line from putting on the bias tape from where I just sewed it, the back part on, okay? So I can just kind of fold it in place. And once I have it folded all the way around, then I'll show you how I'm dealing with this part here, but I want to get the rest of it pinned over first. Okay, so I've got it pinned all the way around. This one that has the fold, the one that has the fold is on the top, okay? This one that is not folded is on the bottom. So I can just carefully overlap it here, fold it under, and again I am pinning it so that the edge, the outside edge of the bias tape covers up the stitching line underneath. So now that I have it like this all the way around, I can just come back and carefully edge stitch it all the way here at the very edge of the bias tape. Once I have that done, then I'll iron it nice and flat. And I love doing it this way because you can see exactly what you're doing and make it look the way you want. So let me go ahead to my machine, and I'm going to start edge stitching probably on this shoulder over here without the big joining, and then come all the way around. And it's easier for me just to keep going instead of starting at a point where I'm joining everything together. So I will be right back. Okay, so the neckline is done, you know, gives it a nice edge. On the inside, you know, it's clean. There might be parts where the stitching isn't exact, like right here, okay? But that's okay because, and what I'm talking about has how the front stitching is slightly lower than the back. That's okay because on the side that everyone sees, it's fine. And that's why I like doing it where you sew the back side on first, then the front, because if you sewed the front on first and then the back, well, then it's a lot easier to do stuff like this where it's visible then, you know, but this is good. So in my opinion, this is probably the trickiest part of the bias tape, getting your neckline done. The rest of it should be pretty easy. And it looks like they want you to do it in a couple of different segments. So coming from under the arm area, straight down each side. Okay, and those are straight seams, so that'll be easy. And I'm going to do it the exact same way where I do the back for open up the tape. You know, you don't have to worry about the ends here because it's just opened all the way. So I'm going to open it all the way up, sew on the back, turn it over, sew on the front. And I'm going to do that for all four, 2 front and 2 back of these side seams. I'll do that one first. Okay, so my sides have the bias tape on them, okay? So right now what I need to deal with is this big, here's my shoulder, this big armhole opening. And again, I'm going to do it the same way where I put the bottom on and then the top. There's one difference. On the left side, they want you to make a loop for a button so that when you are done, you have a little loop that you can put over a button in the back, okay? So they say left side. I don't think it makes that big of a difference as long as at least one side has it. And the loop goes on the front part. So if, you know, this was over my shoulders, this would be my left side over here, this would be my right side. So let me start by just doing the normal right side one. And the first thing I'm going to do is fold this in half to make sure I have enough. And oh yes, I have plenty. So much. Okay, so for the side that does not have the loop, and that is basically 3 out of 4 of the corners, what you're going to do is, again, with the shorter side being the side that I sew onto the back, when I start at the end, I'm going to have it sticking out probably about 1/2 inch, okay? And I'm just going to sew this line all the way around. Once I get that done, then I'll come back and show you how I'm going to fold it in. But to start out with, just leave a tail about 1/2 inch or so, that's a little long there, like about that, sticking out on each corner, okay? Now the side that is your left front, and I am going to stick a little straight pin on my left front so I make sure I don't forget which is that. Instead of just having it stick out by about 1/2 inch, let it stick out, they say, by about 3 inches. So I'm just going to let it hang off about that far instead of just the 1/2 inch, okay? But everything the same, sewing the shorter side of the bias tape to the inside, to the bottom part of the fabric. Okay, so this is the inside, and I have it sewn here. So I'm folding it up, and on, you know, 3 out of 4 of them, where I just need it to end at the right spot, I'm just folding that edge in, folding this in here, and if it looks like this is going to stick out and get in your way, well, you know what, I'm going to chop a little of that off. Okay, and I'm sure the quilters are much better at this than I am, but this is just my method, you know? So then I can fold it over like that, and I can know for sure that it's gonna have a nice edge at the corner here. stick a pin in that. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I edge stitch all the way along. This is the front side right here, all the way up, just to make sure that it covers the line of stitching that I used in the back. When you get to the side that has the long edge, where am I? Here I am. Okay, that's for the other three. Then there's this one that has this long edge. And what they want you to do is just sew it. Basically, when you're edge stitching here, just continue to edge stitch all the way down so that this is sewn closed over here, okay? Once that is done, well, then we'll make our loop afterwards. Okay, and finally, the last part of all of this bias tape is this long one. This is the inside. This is the outside here. What they want you to do is kind of make a little triangle and bring it back so that this raw edge is, in the diagram, it looks like it's just about past where this is. So I'm going to bring it to this point. I have a great big loop up here then, and make stitching right here and right here, just to lock it in a couple places. So let me go ahead and pin this, make that stitching, and I'm going to go ahead and just put this dress up onto my dress form, pin it in place overnight so that the hem can be hanging and everything. So tomorrow all I should have to do is put on some buttons and hem it up. Good morning and welcome to the next day. So when I first came up here this morning, I went ahead and kind of tried on the dress just because it's odd. And on my dress form, the two fronts wouldn't meet, and I was concerned about that. Now, when I put it on my actual body, you know, bodies are softer than dress forms, and it does meet. But I'm thinking that I'm going to do something slightly different for these front connectors, but before I do that, I need to put the button on the back. So here it is. I have a flat button, just a big old flat button here, and I think that that is going to work for my back. And if this is the loop, you know, it's big enough. And I don't think it's going to come out, and this is going to be underneath, so it's not going to show anyway, so I don't have to worry too much about it being a matching button. So let's see, this is where it's supposed to meet, so I'm just going to go ahead and sew the button on this little part up here really quick. Okay, so with that button on, this is what it kind of looks like from the front. I've got these two sides that kind of come around like this. It's really odd, just letting you know, it's really odd. And here's another thing, you know, lower bust me, this part here comes right under the bust. So I might have changed this so it swooped down a little bit lower. I might have, but I didn't. So you'll see it just kind of like snug right up under the bosom, but you know, we can make that work. But anyway, they have, you know, different types things. This has buttons, this has something pretty. So I like 50s kind of things or vintage kind of things that are a little bit different, a little pretty. So this is my thought. I've got some of this, you know, from the beading aisle. And what I think I'm going to do is just take a piece of it down each side as decoration, just in this little area here. And what that's going to do is give me also a little bit of stiffness, and it's going to camouflage, because what I'm going to do is instead of buttons, I'm going to use these big coat hook and eyes, and I'm going to put them underneath so that the goal is not too much of this is visible, you know, that it can, come on, be kind of like that underneath. And I'll get my hooks sewn on first. Okay, 3 hooks, one on top, one on the bottom, and one midway. And then once I have my hooks and eyes sewn on underneath, then I can come back and put this over the top, and that this is going to camouflage any of the stitching that I have from putting these on. That is my thought. So I'm going to get some red thread just so that it's not super obvious that all of this stitching is here, and sew these on. Okay, so I am going to be working on the hem, so I'm going to push the camera down so that we can work on the hem down there. But what I wanted to show you is, if I can crouch down here, I am a high-waisted person, and when I tried this dress on, you know, off camera a little while ago, I had a whole lot of extra room here. Let me see if I can redo this, because when I put the seam on the very top of the shoulder, it was just very loose and bunchy here, because my waist, because this is so tight, I need to make this exactly at my waist. I had a lot of extra length. If I was to make this again, I would shorten the bodice a little bit so that the skirt would come naturally higher. But I didn't. So what I have decided to do is adjust it this way. I am pulling the shoulder seams so that they are just slightly forward, because this neckline seemed like it was a little too high. And by doing that and pulling it forward, because it's like this funky wrap dress, I can lower this neckline a little bit. And I think that that's going to be more comfortable. Okay? And so by doing that, I get the back length that I need, which is great. But that's going to cause some hemming issues. So let me turn the camera down and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so sitting on the floor here, I've got my hem marker. This lovely, lovely tool. And what I need to do is find the place where I have the shortest position on my skirt. And I think it's right around the side seam. So what I'm going to do first is just try to get everything marked so I have an even layered hem. So placing this so it's at that short spot right about there. Okay. So now I can, let's see if I can do this so you can see. The hem marker has a little clapper type thing, and there's a slot there that you can stick a pin in. So let's just work on the front. I can put my fabric through there, clamp it closed, stick a straight pin through, and I have that mark. And I can do the same with this front piece. You just scoot it back here, clap it on there, and put my pin in, okay? And I'm just going to do that all the way around. Once I have my pins all the way around here, then I can take it off my dress form, showing some knee, take it off my dress form, put it back on the table, and cut along that pin line, and then I'll have an even skirt length. Okay, so back up here at the table, I've got my line of pins, and I am just going to make my little slit here to get started. Just trace that line of pins all the way around. This is the front piece that I took all of that extra off, so it looks a little extreme. The back piece, I go anywhere from being right on the edge to up about that far, you know, but let me go ahead and get this cut. Once I have this done, I am just going to make a little narrow hem. Okay, so I'm going to be hemming the circled part of the skirt slightly different than I hem the straight part of the skirt, you know, because I can. So for the circles part, it is fairly curvy, and I don't want a big hem. If I just fold it up 1 inch, press it, and then, or not even press it, just fold it up 1 inch and then tuck it under, I am pretty sure that I can make this work. Just kind of working in that extra ease. You know, that's my goal right now, because this is such a lightweight fabric and it is very simple. I don't want to add a whole bunch of extra stretch lace, which is wonderful. I don't want to have to do easing stitches because my fabric is so lightweight. I don't think that that's necessary either. Now I can tell you what the instructions want you to do is fold it up 1 inch, press it, hand baste a line of stitching near that fold all the way around, then come back up and trim it and then tuck it in and sew it, okay? I'm just not in the mood for that. So just playing here, narrow hem. I think narrow hem is the way I'm gonna go. Just like that. So basically, I'm gonna do the circle skirt part first, and then I will do the straight part of the skirt to match it. So I'm basically just gonna fold the edge in about 1/4 inch, fold it up again, and stick a pin in, and I am gonna pin it all the way around first, okay? Actually, I should pin it so that the head of my pin comes to the outside. That will make it easier while I'm sewing. But I'm gonna do that first, pin it all the way around. I'm going to try to press it before I sew it, just to get that ease, whatever it is, locked in with the pressing. Because if I put a pin right here, and then want to tuck this in, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's not that tight of a circle or of a curve down here. Okay, so I'm over here at my treadle, and I just wanted to show you something. If you've never sewn on a treadle machine before, sometimes it can feel kind of intimidating because you have to stop and touch the wheel, because the wheel always has to move towards you. It can't move away from you or else the thread breaks and things. Put this light up here so maybe you can see better. Okay, so there's a way when I'm sewing, I'm just gonna get started with my hand, and as I'm following along, let's say I'm gonna get up to a point where I have a pen and I have to stop. Well, out of the corner of my eye, when I'm gonna get started again, I can keep both hands down here. Move here. Keep both hands down here. Just out of the corner of my eye, I watch this wheel. And depending on my foot, if like I touch the toes of my feet down first and I see, well, if I do that, the wheel starts to move towards me. So that's right. Then I can keep going. If I basically touch the heel, and well, if I touch my heel and I can see the wheel starting to move away from me, it's like, oops, that's wrong. And then I rock on my toe first. So it's kind of a self-regulating thing where I can see, okay, I need to go toe first. And now that I've stopped so long, it's not going to let me. But it's fun and it's relaxing, and you know, I don't think it records it as steps on my pedometer or anything like that. But like say if I'm going to stop here, pull out this, then if I can kind of want to get started again, I just look and it's like, okay, that's the right way. I can just keep going again. So anyhow, the bottom hem, this is what it is. I folded it up, pinned it, ironed it, and now I'm sewing it. And it's just a little, you know, probably about 3/8 of an inch hem. And I think that that's going to work out just fine. So let me finish sewing this in and I'll see you back at the table. So I got all the way around, and when I got to the very center front, this part was so thick how I turned it over that it was pooching out. So basically I just came in and trimmed the folded area so that it's not visible from the front here, and I am just going to touch that with some of my clear nail polish to hold that in so it's not ever going to want to unravel, and no one will be the wiser, you know, except for all of you who are watching right now, but I think that that is good. So now I need to do my little front hem, which is just a straight hem. It's not curved at all, and so I'm just going to turn it under the same amount as I did on my curved. And then that should be it. Okay, so the little dress is done, and wearing my bright red lipstick because that's pretty much the only chance I'm going to have to do that. My opinion, I think it's very cute. Standing still especially, it's very cute. And I don't feel like there's a real problem with the wind catching this and exposing everything, which is nice in a wrap skirt. However, you have two different dynamics going on. You got the ultra straight underneath and the super wide. So I think you saw when I sit down, the little front part really wants to cinch up a whole bunch, and then we got the drapey part hanging down, which, you know, as long as you're aware of it, that's fine. I think it would be a cute little dress to wear to like a luncheon or shower or something like that, where, you know, you're sitting with your legs under a protected table or something like that, but when you're standing up and walking around, it looks adorable. I think that for me, adjusting it so that my shoulder seam, and that's the thing, my shoulder seam keeps wanting to go back to where it wants to be. What I should have done, if I was really making this to fit my body, is this bodice piece, I would have shortened it by 1 inch and then attached the skirt to the shortened bodice piece in the back, okay? Because this was very, very loose right here, you know, really gapey and loose in the back. So I have to kind of tug it towards the front, but that works, you know, it's just buttoning on and wrapping on. And where I have my little hooks, it just kind of blends together, looking like two seams coming together. I think that's pretty cute. So all in all, I like it. It's more of a, in my opinion, a special event, you know. It's a ladies' luncheon, shower type springtime dress. But I think that the short and straight is the thing that's interesting to me, because like I go up and down my stairs a lot during the day. So walking up and down the stairs, this straight, you know, pulled on straight, short skirt in the front wants to hike up as I'm walking up the stairs. So I get to the top of the stairs and I have to tug it back down and everything. Thankfully, the circle skirt part kind of covers it, but just, you know, that's my own experience. You know, your body's probably a different shape and it probably won't do the same things, but that's it. So anyway, it's been very windy outside the past few days. And it was cold yesterday. It doesn't look as cold. Nothing's frozen out there right now. But I just didn't want to be outside in a wrap skirt trying to do this with the wind and the microphone and everything. So that's why I'm inside. So anyhow, hope you liked it. Kind of a fun little dress. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, free ugly city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn, then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses, the view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.